The Gaza starvation hoax is back. Foreign ministers of 25 Western nations have just issued a statement slamming Israel for withholding vital aid to the Gaza Strip. The statement reads, quote, "The Israeli government's aid delivery model is dangerous, fuels instability, and deprives Gazans of human dignity. We condemn the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of water and food. The Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable. Israel must comply with its obligations under international humanitarian law." The letter also called on Israel to completely end the war. Now, all of this is a lie. There is no starvation crisis in the Gaza Strip. I've talked about this in previous videos. We addressed it a couple of months ago. And in this video, we're going to go through all the details that prove that there is no starvation in the Gaza Strip. And then we are going to talk about why this starvation narrative is being amplified right now. So stick around to the end of the video as we explain what's really going on here. First, a review of the basic facts going all the way back to the beginning of the war. These claims that there is a starvation crisis in the Gaza Strip have been constant almost since the beginning of the war, and they've always turned out to be false. The UN operates something called the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC. Now, this is an arm of the UN that makes assessments that helps aid agencies decide where needs are greatest around the world. Food insecurity is measured by the IPC on a scale of 1 to 5. IPC 1 is the lowest level in the scale that indicates that there's no real hunger problem. IPC 5 being the most extreme, denoting what's called famine conditions. Now, a famine classification, IPC phase 5, is the highest phase of the IPC acute food insecurity scale. And it's attributed, according to the UN, when an area has at least 20% of households facing an extreme lack of food, at least 30% of children suffering from acute malnutrition, and 2 people for every 10,000 dying each day due to outright starvation or to the interaction of malnutrition and disease. Back in February of 2024, a few months into the war, over a year ago, the IPC claimed at that time that 677,000 Gazans were already in stage 5 famine conditions, and they continued to claim this number for the next few months till the end of May 2024. Now, according to their own definition, if 677,000 Gazans were in stage 5, that should have meant 135 deaths per day due to starvation, which means that for that period from February 15th, where the claim was initially made, until May 31st, there should have been over 14,000 deaths due to famine. But at that point, by the end of May 2024, Hamas and the UN itself were only claiming 30 deaths due to starvation or malnutrition from the beginning of the war in October of 2023. Now, by the beginning of June 2024, the IPC website updated its numbers and then started claiming that over 1,100,000 Gazans were in phase 5 famine, which would mean that there should have been approximately 221 starvation deaths every single day. But at that time, Hamas was claiming a few dozen deaths each day at that point in the war, and virtually all of the deaths they were reporting were from military action. No one was being reported as dying from starvation. Now, I laid out all these numbers in a video a couple of months ago towards the end of May, just before the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began operating. Now, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began operating in late May. They operate 4 distribution sites in the Gaza Strip. They're an American organization that's working in close cooperation with the Israelis, and they now distribute food directly to the Gazan citizens, keeping it away from falling into the hands of Hamas. As of yesterday, the GHF has distributed 89 million meals in the 2 months since it started operating. Now, when it first started operating, it only had 1 location open for a little while. It took a couple of weeks for it to start operating all 4 locations. As of now, they are distributing more than 2 million meals per day. And not all Gazans are coming to these sites. You may have heard claims of IDF soldiers opening fire on Gazans who are coming to collect aid at these sites. Now, these are all pure lies. There's not a single piece of footage anywhere that shows Israeli soldiers firing on Gazans, despite all of the claims. And you see this in all the media claiming that Israel opens fire on the crowds that are coming. It's pure lies. There is not a single shred of evidence. The GHF has denied them. But there is footage of Hamas operatives attacking Gazans coming to collect aid. That we know is happening. And again, the GHF, this American organization, has also corroborated that Hamas is attacking Gazans coming to collect aid at the GHF sites. And we've reported on this in previous videos that Hamas has also issued warnings telling people not to cooperate with the GHF because Hamas needs the GHF to fail. We'll get into that in a moment. In addition to the GHF sites where Gazans can come and collect aid directly from this American organization, Israel is still also allowing in trucks of aid to parts of the Gaza Strip that are still under Hamas control. And those are supposed to be picked up and distributed by the United Nations. The coordinator of Israeli government activities in the territories, Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip, which keeps meticulous records of the quantities of aid coming in, the locations of aid, the types of aid. You can find them online if you look up COGAT, C-O-G-A-T. COGAT put out a statement saying that over the last month, there has been a significant decline in the collection of humanitarian aid from the crossings by the international aid organizations. This is referring to the aid that is supposed to be picked up by the UN and brought into Gaza, into areas still not under Israeli control. As of now, the statement goes on, the contents of approximately 950 truckloads of humanitarian aid are awaiting collection on the Gazan side of the Kerem Shalom and Zikim crossings. These trucks are simply waiting there. Now, the UN says that there are bureaucratic and logistical problems. The Israeli government denies that they're standing in the way. They're waiting for the UN to pick them up. The GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, has offered help to the UN in bringing these 950 truckloads of aid in. The UN has not yet accepted the offer. Look, if anyone is starving in the Gaza Strip, it is not because of a lack of quantities. In the video that I did a few months ago, I showed that the quantities of aid that have been entering the Gaza Strip from the beginning of the war to today have remained constant, and there's never been a starvation problem. Throughout the war, there have been headlines and warnings of looming starvation or risk of starvation or threat of starvation, looming starvation in the Gaza Strip. There's never been any evidence of actual starvation. And the truth is, you could just look at the videos of Gazans, and we see that they're not living in pleasant conditions, but Gazans are not starving. The quantity of food brought into the Gaza Strip in humanitarian aid since the beginning of the war exceeds the quantity of food required by the World Food Program to provide sufficient nutrition. In fact, it's enough for about 27 months, even though this war is only about 18 months old. If anyone is starving in the Gaza Strip, it's because Hamas is withholding food from them, not because of anything Israel's doing to prevent food from getting in. So why is this narrative so important to Hamas? Why is there this push right now to accuse Israel of starving the Gazans? So let's pull back the camera and talk about how humanitarian aid has been used since the very beginning of the war. As I've said repeatedly in these videos and in articles that I've written, and you could download the ebook in the description of this video where I talk about a lot of the issues that have gone on since the beginning of this war, and I address this issue in a number of the pieces in that free ebook. As we pointed out repeatedly, the new distribution system of food by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in cooperation with the Israelis distributes food directly into the hands of the Gazans for no charge. And Hamas needs this new system to fail. So long as the people of Gaza are receiving humanitarian aid directly from the Israelis or the Americans, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and Hamas is not in the picture, Hamas cannot sell this food for exorbitant prices. They can't make money off of it. They can't control the population. They need it to fail. And that's why they've been threatening people, and that's why they've been attacking people who are receiving the aid at the distribution sites and generally causing chaos, and also spreading these false stories with all sorts of eyewitness accounts, none of which are corroborated with any evidence whatsoever, that Israel is opening fire. Now, of course, Israel has no reason whatsoever to fire on Gazans coming to collect humanitarian aid, because Israel needs this new system of humanitarian aid distribution to work. The whole strategy behind it was to weaken Hamas, to take the population away from their dependence on Hamas. And if Israel was going to start firing on the people coming to receive the aid, they would stop coming and the system would fail, and this would keep Hamas in power longer. So this is why Hamas and the UN have not been collecting the food that's sitting on these over 900 pallets, these truckloads of food, is because they have no incentive to have an abundance of food available in the Gaza Strip. They would rather leave it there and claim that there's a starvation crisis going on. It could also be the case that what they're describing as logistical or bureaucratic obstacles to bringing the food in is really just Israel having more surveillance over where the trucks are going. And Israel, of course, does not want the aid falling into Hamas's hands. We've covered this extensively in a number of videos over the last few weeks. Let me make one final point. To those foreign ministers, those 25 nations that signed a letter calling on Israel to end the humanitarian crisis and end the war in the Gaza Strip. The only reason that the war continues is that Hamas refuses to release the innocent civilians that they took hostage on October 7th and refuses to lay down its arms. If Hamas, this terrorist organization that we're told does not represent the Palestinian people, would lay down its arms and release the hostages, the war would be over. And the only people suffering from starvation in the Gaza Strip, as we saw a few months ago when Israeli hostages were released, is the Israeli civilians who are being held in those tunnels. There is no starving Gazan population in the Gaza Strip. There is only an effort to save Hamas and keep this war going.